Please welcome Lavern Rushin from her home in Virginia Beach, Virginia, for her first television interview since her son Matthew's release from prison. Lavern, thank you so much for joining us. Matthew will join us a little bit later, but I wanted to talk with you because this was a fight that you had to take on for your son, for your family. He's been home now 3 days. How is it, when I look at my son, sometimes I can't believe he's mine. When you're looking at him now, these 3 days, is it surreal that he's in the home, that he's back with you?
Thank you for having me today. Yes, um, I'm, I'm overjoyed. I have so much emotions happening all at once, and to know that it's been such a long journey just to get him home has been it has been gratifying when I look at him.
I just reported some of the details of the accident that night. I want to hear from you when you got that call, especially knowing that your son has special needs. Every parent with a child who is facing a difficult challenge, you want them to be able to be an adult and have that independence. So there he is, the rite of passage, being able to drive a car. You get a call that there's been an accident. What were you told at that time in the initial call?
Well, when I looked at the phone, I didn't recognize the phone number, but I answered it because I was trying to get a hold of him. And I answered it, and it was an officer, and he said, Miss Rushin, Matthew Rushin has been in a car accident. I said, well, can I speak to him? What happened? They weren't giving me any information. The only information that they gave me was that where the location was, and my heart just dropped. Like, if they weren't giving me any indication of what had happened, I was thinking, well, is he alive? Is something? And I did disclose to the officer at that time. I said Matthew is autistic, and if I'm understanding what you're telling me, he's going to need somebody there. I said, do you realize 2 years ago he was in an accident and he was in a coma? And he's probably, having PTSD from that and not being able to communicate. So when I got that phone call, I didn't know what to say, what to do. I immediately, told my husband. I said, you have to go down there. You have to go down there. And then I got off the phone.
Had you been worried? I know he had the prior accident, but had you been worried about how much independence do we give him? How much can he handle? Because if he is in a situation where he's panicked or life is coming at him too fast, that he might not be able to handle it.
hmm Um, I pretty much, we after he hit 18, we kind of helped him understand that if anybody was, to approach him, if he was stopped by law enforcement, he actually grew. The sad part about it is that he grew up with half of these officers here in Virginia Beach because his cousin was a sergeant for our area. So a lot of the officers knew him. So we trusted the officers, and we always kind of figured that if he was stopped by an officer and he disclosed that he was autistic, they would know how to interact with him. But that night, it was like all their training went out the door. No one wanted to even recognize and acknowledge that he was autistic. Like, no, that was not even part of their investigation at all. Because if they had, he would have been taken to the hospital. Matthew was never taken to the hospital. Never.
When you ask them to get someone on the scene who would be able to communicate with him, what did they tell you?
They had no response for that. They said the CIT officer was on hand, but it was the CIT officer, the crisis intervention officer, that actually charged Matthew with second-degree attempted murder.
And you believe the reason that charge, which Matthew eventually pled guilty to, and he signed these documents not fully understanding what he was facing, a lot of this started with the basic lack of understanding or acknowledgement that he needed specific attention and he needed specific help based on his condition.
That is correct. Yes.
And as a
That is-
result of his condition, he then, or at least it was interpreted, that Matthew said he deliberately caused the accident to take his own life.
So that night, when Matthew came out of the vehicle, there was a man yelling at Matthew, "Are you effing trying to kill yourself? Are you effing trying to kill yourself?" And Matthew, one of Matthew's processes called echolalia. And with the echolalia, Matthew repeated, obviously, the kill myself, kill myself. And so that actually led to the narrative of what the police then put across the or the Commonwealth of City of Virginia Beach put across to the media that Matthew was trying to commit suicide, but he wasn't. 17 officers, 14 body cam, videos. Matthew was on body cam from beginning to end, and none of that. Nowhere in there did Matthew ever say, "I wanted to commit suicide." Nowhere in there. He kept saying, when I came to, that means he had a seizure when he made that U-turn. And he kept saying, when I came to, well, yeah, when he came to, it was too late.
Wow.
And if they had understood that, and they had understood that, first of all, autistic individuals are susceptible to seizures, and that if they had done their job and followed through with the training that they got and the CIT officers received, I think that they would have seen
Wow.
that his autism played a huge part in this.
When we come back, Matthew will join us for his first television interview with his mother, who fought for his freedom. That's next.
What it looks like, macaroni and cheese, getting ready to go in the oven for Matthew. But I hope he really enjoys it. I miss cooking for him. I really do miss cooking for him. I know he'll enjoy this. He's been asking for this for a very long time. He has.
Welcome back. That was my guest, Lavern Rushin, preparing her son Matthew's first home-cooked meal in more than 2 years. He was released from prison after being sentenced to what many say was a harsh sentence of 50 years after a car accident that left one victim with permanent brain injuries. He was conditionally pardoned by the governor of the state and walked free 3 days ago. Matthew joins us with his mother at his side for their first sit-down TV interview since his release. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. I'm told you had a difficult night last night, that all of this is still so raw. What happened?
I woke up at 5 o'clock in a panic, thinking that I had missed count. Standing count is when they come through. They come through and do a head count at 5 a.m., 11 a.m., and 5 a.m., 11 a.m., 5 p.m., and 9 p.m. And so for the past couple mornings, I've been waking up at 5 thinking, oh my God, I missed count. But then I have to realize that I'm home.
When you say they do miscount, you're talking about in prison, where you have to
Yeah.
get out and the guards make sure that you're still behind bars. And you
Yeah.
woke up believing that that was still your reality.
Yes.
Matthew, the night of the accident is one that I'm sure plays over and over in your head. How did you feel that night when you came to and you were trying to explain, did you feel heard? Did you feel helped? Did you feel like they were listening to you at the scene?
It's kind of hard to explain. It felt like I was talking to mannequins, like in all sense of that word. Like they just they stood there staring at me, and it was almost as if they already knew what I was being charged with before I even started speaking to anyone.
Do you remember what happened? Do you remember anything about the seizure or any of the accident?
Um, I'm not gonna go into great detail on the accident because it kind of brings up a lot of uh, bad feelings. But I will say that I remember right before the accident, I remember coming to.
You spent all of those, what, 27 months total in prison. You're someone who'd never been in any trouble in your life. You'd never had anything like this. You live in a suburb with loving family around you. When people say something is a nightmare, how do you describe you are in prison for an accident that you say was not intentional and people didn't understand how to communicate with you? How do you describe that time for you behind bars, knowing that you didn't do this intentionally?
Um, the best that I could do was stay true to myself and show people that I'm not the individual they painted me to be.
Who did they paint you to be?
A murderer. They painted me as someone who is vindictive and malicious, and someone who, I guess, satiates their inner demon by harming others. And I showed the world, everyone, that I'm not that person.